Hey guys, I wanted to take a moment to say thank you again for tuning into the podcast. As you guys know, we do a pre-show for NWA Power on YouTube every Tuesday at 5:05 Eastern, 2:05 Pacific. Now this show, this Talk NWA, is a clip from that show. We were talking about Jax Dane because the former NWA GrandSlam Champion, I'm going to call him GrandSlam Champion, was actually scheduled to be on NWA's Superpower today. He was supposed to face Tim Storm in a match that had been built up over the past few weeks with the whole Mama Storm angle. And although I don't enjoy the angle, I do love me some Jax Dane. So here I am going to wax poetic about our former Worlds Heavyweight Champion. But I also want to tell you guys that there is, in fact, going to be an episode of something at that 6:05 time slot on YouTube.com/NWA. What it is, what it will be, I have no idea. It might even be the Jax Dane Tim Storm match. That's why it's really important for me to release this audio today. I was actually going to release it yesterday ahead of the news of the NWA shutting down all operations until June because of the COVID-19 coronavirus, but that was a little bit more important than this, but I still think this is worth listening to. So if you guys are here, thank you again for checking it out. If you enjoy the show, wherever you're listening to, whether it be Anchor.fm or Apple iTunes or Google Play or even Spotify, hit like, hit subscribe, share it with your friends. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you. Without any further ado, Jax Dane's... Well, it's not really Jax Dane. It's just me talking about him. All right, there you go. Godzilla. And I want to talk about the former NWA Worlds Heavyweight Champion. Now, I believe it's going to be on next week's NWA Power. We're going to see Jax Dane reignite his feud with Tim Storm. And I do mean reignite because, well, these two gentlemen have a storied past. And it's kind of fitting that on the wall they just so happen to be right above one another. Now, if you're on Instagram, you don't see that. And if you're on Twitch, you might see that. I don't know. But I do want to bring up a couple of things about our man Jax Dane. Now, first and foremost, if you guys go to our Anchor channel or Spotify or really any of those, any places you can find the J Cal's podcast, we recently upped an episode from 2013 where my man DKM, Jaden, and I spoke to Jax Dane. And now this was before he became NWA Worlds Heavyweight Champion. And you can give that a listen again. If you go to our Instagram stories, there's a link there. And soon there will be a link on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else. But make sure to check that out. If you're a fan of Jax Dane, it's certainly worth a listen. Now, the native of Bakewell, Tennessee, Jax Dane is one of the unsung heroes of the National Wrestling Alliance during that Bruce Tharpe era. There wasn't a whole lot to celebrate during those days, but of course Rob Conway and Jax Dane were two of the bright spots, at least in my opinion. Dane was he was originally a tag team wrestler, teaming with Raymond Rowe. Now, some of you guys who watch WWE programming know Raymond Rowe as Eric from the Viking Raiders or the Viking Experience or whatever they're being called this week. And him and Rowe were actually a pretty lethal combination. They were the NWA Lone Star Tag Team titles. In fact, get used to that phrase, NWA Lone Star, because a lot of Jax Dane's early history with the NWA was in the Southwest region, exclusively to Texas. That includes NWA Houston, NWA Lone Star, NWA Branded Outlaw Wrestling, NWA Texoma, so on and so forth. Anyways, Dane was one of the few guys to actually unify the heavyweight championships in Texas. So at one point he was the NWA State of Texas champion. He was the NWA Texoma champion. The NWA Lone Star champion, as well as the NWA Branded Outlaw champion. They held those three titles simultaneously. Around the time that he lost those titles, in fact, the podcast goes into detail how he lost the titles of champion to Byron Wilcott and James Claxton, the Cowboy. Right around this time, Jax was actually scheduled to get a title match against the then champion Cahagas. Now, Cahagas was the first crowned world champion in the Bruce Tharpe era. After Adam Pearce and Colt Cabana left the title in Australia, they both vacated their claim to the championship. It was in I think Glassboro. It was in New Jersey. It was in actually a friend of the website, NWA Dog, or now they're just Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators. Good friends to the show, good friends to the podcast. They've always helped put us over. That they crowned the first post Adam Pearce NWA World Champion, and that was the Tokyo Monster Cahagas. Now, Cahagas had won the title, and he was making his defenses around the world, even defended in the Dominican Republic, the last NWA World Champion to defend in the Dominican. He was scheduled to face Jax Dane, but due to injury, he couldn't make the defense. In fact, he had to forfeit his title shot, but the NWA office allowed Rob Conway to actually fill in for Jax. And that's where we get a new World Heavyweight Champion in Rob Conway. Now, the important thing to that is the relationship between Rob Conway and Jax Dane. There was already kind of a mentorship in place. Conway was kind of grooming Jax Dane, and Conway wasn't even wrestling really regularly at the time. So for him to, kind of steal that world title, it kind of ignited the NWA in a different direction. In a lot of ways, it was very similar to Nick Aldis winning the NWA Worlds Heavyweight Championship. Now, at this time, Conway and Dane started partnering together. In fact, when Rob Conway made his first defenses in Japan, it was with Bruce Tharpe and Jax Dane in his corner. They won the NWA Tag Team titles. They competed in the World Tag League in both 2013 and 2014 for New Japan Pro Wrestling. And during that time, Conway and Dane were stepping in the ring with a lot of Japanese wrestling legends. Kojima, Tenzin, the Bullet Club, Archer, Lance Archer, Hoyt, Davey Boy Smith. The list goes on. And they had won the tag team titles while in Japan in a four-way match, actually beat Davey Boy Smith Jr. and Lance Archer, Lance Hoyt, before losing the titles to Kojima and Tenzin. And a lot of great stuff was happening for the NWA around that time, 2013, 2014. Kukushi, I'll get to you guys' comments in a minute, but Kukushi corrected me. It was in Clayton, New Jersey, not Glassboro. Thanks for the update, Kukushi. So that brings us to early 2015. Now, Jax Dane is no longer teaming with Rob Conway, is no longer competing in New Japan Pro Wrestling, but he was smashing his way through the National Wrestling Alliance. Got himself a national championship by defeating Lou Marconi. Now, that was his first BOD-controlled singles title. So at this point, Jax Dane is a tag team champion for the NWA, and now he holds the national championship. This is where Tim Storm enters the picture. Now, Tim Storm himself was attempting to, reach for that brass ring and become the NWA Worlds Heavyweight Champion as well. And now his path led him to the North American Championship. But a showdown between the two of them resulted in Jax Dane unifying for a brief time the North American Championship and the National Heavyweight Championship. Now, the rumors of the time were that was going to be it for the national title, that the belts would be forever unified, until Jax Dane was injured. Jax had to forfeit both titles, meaning he gave up his opportunity to challenge for the World Heavyweight Championship. He had to surrender both titles. Tim Storm would go on to win the North American title back. But through the injury, Jax Dane would end up getting a shot at the World's Heavyweight Champion in Hiroshi Tenzan. Now, this match happened on August 29th. So when Jax defeated Tenzin, that was the first time that he won the World Heavyweight Championship. Now, you have to understand, at the time, that's the Grand Slam of the NWA, because, of course, Jax couldn't compete for the Junior Heavyweight title. I don't think Jax could have competed for the Junior Heavyweight title when he was 10 years old, let alone as a full-grown adult. And he wasn't going to be competing for the Women's Championship. So he literally held every single title of any importance for the National Wrestling Alliance back in 2015. Now, Jax would go on to face a lot of great opponents, including Charlie Haas, and even defeated Rob Conway, the former champion, on December 19, 2015. And that would be at Innovative Pro Wrestling. Back then it was called NWA Smoky Mountain. But then the thorn returned into the side of one Jax Dane. And that would be Tim Storm. Because again, remember, he's the North American champion. And it's his obligation, rather it's his opportunity to challenge for that World's Heavyweight Championship. Now this is kind of unheard of, because these guys, you know, with the NWA, when the NWA was a series of territories and a lot of smaller promotions, feuds and angles were hard to come by. Now we had Chance Prophet and Damian Wayne and Adam Pearce and the Maestro of Wrestling, Adam Pearce and Colt Boom Boom Cabana, Adam Pearce and Brent Albright, Adam Pearce and Blue Demon, but feuds were kind of few and far between that stretched across the end of Tim Storm and Jax Dane was a feud that stretched across the NWA. It wasn't just in Texas, it wasn't just in Tennessee, it was all over the country. In fact, the two met up at the Cauliflower Alley Club on a show presented by Vendetta Pro Wrestling, who then at the time was a member of the NWA. And the title, Jax Dane ended up retaining that title. They would have another match that would result in a no falls counted. It was a disqualification. The match was thrown out. But eventually Tim Storm would win that NWA Worlds Heavyweight Championship. And that what we thought would close the door on the Tim Storm Jax Dane feud. But it didn't, guys. It didn't. Because last week on NWA Power, Mama Storm came out. Well, it wasn't Mama Storm, obviously. The man who had been portraying Mama Storm came out and reminded Tim Storm of his past. Reminded Tim Storm of his history with Jax Dane. Jax Dane never received a rematch for the World's Heavyweight Championship. Tim Storm was treated as a hero upon the purchase of the NWA by Billy Corgan and Lightning One. He was treated as a hero, and he was elevated to heights never seen in the NWA in probably a decade. But remember, Jax Dane is the guy that carried the ball to get to Tim Storm. And without somebody like Jax Dane, I don't know if the NWA is still as relevant as it is today, or it was 3 years ago.